The phone rang at 2 in the morning, jolting me awake in my Austin penthouse. My father's voice cracked through the speaker, desperate and broken in ways I'd never heard before. He was begging me to save Thompson Construction, the century-old family business that had been promised to my sister Sarah since we were kids. The same business they'd kicked me out of at 18 because I wasn't good enough. Now Sarah had destroyed everything with her MBA theories and zero real-world experience, and suddenly the son they called worthless was their only hope. The irony tasted bitter as my parents sobbed through the phone, finally admitting they'd made the biggest mistake of their lives. Growing up in Springfield, Illinois, I lived in the shadow of Thompson Construction Company, the business my great-grandfather built from nothing in 1924. The red brick building on Maple Street housed 3 generations of family pride, with faded photographs of completed projects lining the lobby walls. My earliest memories involved the smell of sawdust and the sound of blueprints rustling as my grandfather Thomas spread them across his massive oak desk. From the time I could hold a hammer, I spent every summer at construction sites with Grandpa Thomas. He taught me to read the language of buildings, to understand how foundations breathed with the earth, and how walls carried the weight of dreams. By age 10, I could operate a small excavator and spot structural problems that seasoned workers missed. The knowledge flowed through my veins like inherited wisdom, connecting me to something larger than myself. My sister Sarah, 3 years younger, and blessed with our mother's delicate features, showed absolutely no interest in getting her hands dirty. While I learned to mix concrete and read blueprints, she excelled in ballet classes and advanced mathematics. Her bedroom walls displayed academic awards and dance recital photos, while mine showcased collections of vintage construction tools and architectural sketches. The shift began subtly when Sarah entered middle school. Our parents David and Linda Thompson started treating her academic achievements as family celebrations, while dismissing my practical accomplishments as expected routine. When I designed a treehouse using proper engineering principles at age 13, Dad glanced at it briefly before rushing off to Sarah's science fair presentation. The message became clear: brains mattered more than hands. During high school, the favoritism intensified into something painful and obvious. Sarah's report cards earned family dinners at expensive restaurants, while my successful completion of a summer internship with Morrison Brothers Construction barely warranted a nod of acknowledgement. I watched my parents beam with pride as they discussed Sarah's college prospects, planning her future leadership of Thompson Construction, despite her complete lack of interest in the field. The breaking point came during my sophomore year when I suggested implementing a new foundation technique I'd learned from studying my grandfather's journals. The method could save 20% on material costs while improving structural integrity. I presented detailed calculations and sketches to my father, excited to contribute something meaningful to the family business. Dad barely looked at my work before dismissing it as amateur theorizing, explaining that Sarah would bring real business expertise to the company once she earned her degree. That night, I found Grandpa Thomas in his workshop behind our house, carefully sharpening his vintage chisels. At 78, his hands still moved with the precision of a master craftsman. I told him about Dad's reaction, trying to hide my disappointment. Grandpa Thomas set down his tools and looked at me with eyes that held decades of construction wisdom. "Ryan," he said, his voice carrying the weight of experience, "your father sees numbers and profit margins. But buildings aren't just business ventures. They're promises we make to the future commitments that our work will stand long after we're gone. You understand that connection because you felt it in your hands." He led me to his filing cabinet and pulled out leather-bound journals dating back to the company's founding. Page after page revealed detailed notes about construction techniques, client relationships, and the philosophy that had built Thompson Construction's reputation. "True builders aren't made in classrooms," he whispered, pressing the journals into my hands. "They're forged through experience, one project at a time." Grandpa Thomas died suddenly of a heart attack during the winter of my junior year. The funeral filled Springfield's largest church with contractors, clients, and community members sharing stories of his integrity and craftsmanship. But while everyone mourned a respected businessman, I grieved the loss of my mentor and the only person who truly understood my passion. The night before the funeral, Grandpa Thomas's lawyer approached me privately with a small wooden box. Inside lay his original tool set from the 1940s, each piece maintained in perfect condition. A handwritten note explained that these tools had built half of downtown Springfield and should belong to someone who would honor their legacy. As we lowered his casket into the frozen ground, I clutched those tools and made a silent promise to continue his tradition of excellence, regardless of my family's plans for the business. The revelation came 3 weeks after the funeral, when I accidentally overheard my parents discussing their estate planning with their attorney in the living room. I'd come home early from basketball practice and was heading upstairs when their conversation stopped me cold. "Sarah will inherit Thompson Construction outright," my father stated matter-of-factly. "She's got the intellectual capacity to modernize operations and expand into new markets. Her business degree will be invaluable for navigating today's complex commercial environment." My mother's voice carried equal certainty. "Ryan's a good boy, but he's more suited for hands-on work. Sarah understands the bigger picture. She'll hire qualified managers to handle the day-to-day operations while she focuses on strategic growth." The attorney's pen scratched against paper as he documented their decision to exclude me from the family business I'd been preparing to inherit since childhood. They discussed my sister's potential as if she were a prized investment, while reducing me to hired help in my own grandfather's company. That evening, I confronted them in the kitchen while Sarah was at dance practice. The conversation exploded into the most painful argument of my young life. When I demanded to know why they'd written me off, my father's response cut deeper than any physical wound. "You're thinking small, Ryan. Playing with tools and getting dirty might seem important now, but business requires vision and education. Sarah has both. You're limiting yourself to being a worker instead of a leader." My mother nodded her agreement, adding that my focus on construction techniques showed a lack of ambition. They'd already decided that Sarah's potential to elevate the family's social and financial status outweighed my genuine understanding of the business itself. The climactic moment arrived when I realized they'd never seen me as anything more than free labor, someone to maintain their equipment, while the real heir prepared for her throne. Standing in that kitchen, surrounded by 3 generations of family photos, I understood that my parents had already erased me from their vision of Thompson Construction's future. My junior and senior years of high school became a battleground between my passion and my parents' expectations. While Sarah accumulated college acceptance letters and academic honors, I threw myself deeper into construction work, taking every available internship and part-time opportunity. My grades suffered as I prioritized hands-on experience over classroom theory, a choice that horrified my parents and widened the growing divide between us. After school, I worked for various local contractors, learning different specialties from foundation work to electrical installation. Each job taught me something new about the construction industry, building a comprehensive understanding that no textbook could provide. My supervisors consistently praised my work ethic and natural problem-solving abilities, but these accomplishments meant nothing to my family. The contrast became more painful during Sarah's senior year when she received a full academic scholarship to Northwestern University. The celebration dinner at Springfield's most expensive restaurant felt like a coronation ceremony, with relatives and family friends toasting Sarah's bright future. I sat at the far end of the table, invisible and forgotten, while everyone discussed her plans to study business administration and eventually transform Thompson Construction into a modern corporate entity. My own college applications told a different story. I researched construction management programs at state universities, focusing on schools that combined practical training with business fundamentals. The University of Illinois offered exactly what I needed, but when my parents discovered my application, their reaction shook the foundation of our already strained relationship. "Construction management," my father shouted, waving my application like evidence of betrayal. "You're throwing away every opportunity we've given you to pursue manual labor as a career choice. This is exactly the kind of short-sighted thinking that will keep you stuck in the same place for the rest of your life." My mother joined the attack, her voice trembling with disappointment. "We've sacrificed so much to give you and Sarah better lives than we had. How can you be so ungrateful? Sarah understands that education and professional credentials matter in today's world. You're choosing to limit yourself when you could be so much more." The ultimatum came during a tense family meeting in our living room, with Sarah sitting quietly in the corner while our parents laid down their final terms. They would support my college education only if I abandoned construction-related studies and pursued a degree in business law or another field they considered respectable. The family business would remain Sarah's inheritance, but they might find a management position for me if I proved myself worthy through proper education. I looked around the room where I'd grown up, taking in the family photos and heirlooms that represented 4 generations of Thompson history. Sarah avoided eye contact, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation, but unwilling to challenge our parents' decision. In that moment, I realized they were asking me to betray everything I'd learned from Grandpa Thomas and abandon the only career that had ever felt meaningful. "I won't do it," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the emotional turmoil. "Construction isn't just a job for me, it's who I am. Grandpa Thomas taught me that buildings represent promises we make to the future, and I want to keep making those promises." The explosion that followed revealed years of accumulated resentment and fundamental misunderstandings about what mattered most to each of us. My father called me stubborn and foolish, predicting that I'd end up as just another construction worker struggling to make ends meet. My mother cried, accusing me of rejecting their love and guidance out of teenage rebellion. But the words that hurt most came when they compared me directly to Sarah, explaining that she possessed the intelligence and ambition necessary for real success, while I was settling for mediocrity. They couldn't understand that I'd found something more valuable than their approval, a sense of purpose that connected me to my grandfather's legacy and my own deepest passions. The final confrontation occurred on my 18th birthday, a day that should have been celebratory, but instead marked the end of my childhood family. I'd already been accepted to the University of Illinois Construction Management program and planned to fund my education through student loans and continued part-time work. When I announced my decision at breakfast, my parents' reaction exceeded even my worst expectations. "Then you've made your choice," my father declared, his face flushed with anger and disappointment. "If you're determined to waste your potential, you'll do it without our support or our name. Thompson Construction will go to someone who appreciates what we've built here." My mother's tears turned to cold fury as she added, "You're breaking this family apart with your selfishness. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us, by throwing away every advantage we've worked to provide." The cruelest moment came when they told me I had 24 hours to pack my belongings and leave their house. They were done enabling what they saw as my destructive choices, and they needed to focus their energy on supporting Sarah's promising future. I was officially cut off from family financial support, family connections, and most painfully, family love. That afternoon, I loaded my few possessions into the beaten-up Ford pickup truck I'd bought with construction earnings. Grandpa Thomas's tools and journals filled the truck bed, along with clothes, books, and personal items that represented 18 years of life in Springfield. Sarah watched from her bedroom window as I secured everything with tarps, but she never came outside to say goodbye. My parents stood in the doorway as I started the engine, their faces showing no sign of regret or second thoughts. The message was unmistakably clear. I was no longer their son, just a disappointing former family member who'd chosen the wrong path. As I drove away from the only home I'd ever known, I felt simultaneously heartbroken and strangely liberated. The final twist of the knife came when I drove past Thompson Construction's office building. For what I thought might be the last time, through the large front windows, I could see my parents inside already hanging up Sarah's high school graduation photo and Northwestern University acceptance letter in the lobby where Grandpa Thomas's construction photos had displayed for decades. They were literally erasing my connection to the family business before I'd even left town. In that moment, I understood that my exile wasn't just about college choices or career paths. My parents had fundamentally decided that Sarah represented the future they wanted, while I represented a past they were eager to abandon. The construction worker's grandson wasn't good enough for their upgraded vision of success. But as I drove toward the interstate carrying my grandfather's tools and wisdom toward an uncertain future, I made a promise that would sustain me through the difficult years ahead. I would prove that their golden child favoritism was the biggest mistake they'd ever made, and someday they would regret choosing image over substance, potential over passion. Austin, Texas welcomed me with blazing summer heat and endless possibilities. I arrived with $800 in cash, Grandpa Thomas's tools, and a determination forged by rejection and disappointment. The sprawling city buzzed with construction activity as tech companies and new residents transformed the landscape, creating opportunities for anyone willing to work hard enough to seize them. My first month involved sleeping in the truck bed and showering at a local gym while searching for both employment and affordable housing. The construction sites scattered throughout Austin's booming neighborhoods became my classroom and proving ground. I started as a general laborer for minimum wage hauling materials and cleaning work areas while observing experienced craftsmen and absorbing their techniques. The physical demands were brutal, especially during Texas summers when temperatures regularly exceeded 100 degrees. My hands blistered and bled until calluses formed, and my muscles ached constantly as they adapted to the relentless pace of commercial construction. But every sunrise brought new lessons and small victories that built my confidence and expanded my skills. My first break came when I noticed a foundation crew struggling with a drainage problem that threatened to delay their entire project. Drawing on knowledge from Grandpa Thomas's journals, I suggested a modified French drain system that could redirect water flow without requiring major excavation. The site foreman, skeptical but desperate, agreed to let me implement my solution after hours. The technique worked perfectly, saving 3 days of expensive delays and earning me recognition as someone who could think beyond basic manual labor. Word spread quickly through Austin's tight-knit construction community that the young guy from Illinois had both practical skills and innovative problem-solving abilities. Contractors started requesting me for their crews, and my daily wage increased accordingly. By winter, I'd saved enough money to rent a small apartment near downtown Austin and enroll in evening business courses at Austin Community College. The classes covered accounting, project management, and small business operations, filling gaps in my knowledge while maintaining my focus on construction excellence. I studied late into the night after full days on job sites, driven by memories of my parents' dismissal and my grandfather's example. The turning point arrived during my second year when I met Marcus Rodriguez, a Mexican-American entrepreneur who owned a small commercial renovation company. Marcus had built his business from nothing, starting as an undocumented immigrant who learned construction through sheer determination. His company, Rodriguez Restoration, specialized in updating older buildings while preserving their historical character. I was working on a downtown office renovation when Marcus noticed my attention to detail and willingness to tackle complex problems that other workers avoided. After observing me for several weeks, he approached me with an offer that would change everything. "You've got something special," Marcus told me during a lunch break, his weathered face serious but kind. Most guys your age just want to get through the day and collect their paychecks. But you're always asking questions, always looking for better ways to do things. That's the kind of thinking that builds businesses, not just buildings. Marcus offered me a junior partnership in Rodriguez Restoration with opportunities to learn every aspect of running a construction company. The partnership required me to invest my savings as working capital, but it also gave me profit-sharing opportunities and hands-on business experience that no classroom could provide. Working with Marcus opened my eyes to the entrepreneurial possibilities within construction. We specialized in challenging projects that larger companies avoided, using creativity and craftsmanship to solve problems that seemed impossible. Marcus taught me to see each renovation as a puzzle requiring both technical skill and business acumen to solve profitably. Our breakthrough project came when we won a contract to renovate the historic Paramount Theater in downtown Austin. The 1920 building required extensive structural updates while maintaining its original architectural integrity. The project demanded innovative solutions that respected the past while meeting modern building codes and accessibility requirements. I developed a technique for reinforcing the theater's aging foundation, using micro-piles and polymer injection that strengthened the structure without damaging the decorative plasterwork above. The method required precise calculations and careful execution, but it solved a problem that had stumped 3 other contractors and threatened to make the renovation financially impossible. The Paramount Theater project established Rodriguez Restoration's reputation for tackling complex historical renovations, leading to contracts with museums, churches, and other significant buildings throughout Central Texas. My contributions earned recognition from architectural preservation societies and generated media coverage that brought additional business opportunities. But my most significant innovation came when I began developing energy-efficient retrofitting techniques for older commercial buildings. By combining my understanding of traditional construction methods with modern environmental technologies, I created systems that dramatically reduced operating costs while preserving historical character. The breakthrough involved using Grandpa Thomas's journals to understand how buildings were designed to work with natural airflow and thermal mass before mechanical systems became standard. I adapted those principles using contemporary materials and techniques, creating retrofits that cut energy costs by 30 to 40%, while improving indoor comfort and air quality. Word of my energy-efficient retrofitting spread throughout Austin's environmentally conscious business community. Property owners discovered they could reduce operating expenses, improve tenant satisfaction, and earn tax credits for environmental improvements, all while preserving the character that made their buildings valuable. As my reputation grew, so did my confidence and ambition. The scared 18-year-old who'd fled Springfield was becoming a skilled craftsman and innovative businessman. Every successful project proved that my parents had been wrong about my potential and my ability to create something meaningful in the construction industry. The validation I'd never received from my family came instead from satisfied clients, successful projects, and the growing recognition that I possessed a rare combination of practical expertise and creative problem-solving abilities. But the deepest satisfaction came from knowing that I was continuing Grandpa Thomas's tradition of excellence while building something entirely my own. The emotional climax of this period arrived when I received a wedding invitation forwarded through multiple addresses, finally reaching me 3 years after Sarah had mailed it to my old Springfield apartment. The formal invitation, printed on expensive cardstock, announced her marriage to Jonathan Cambridge, described as a financial analyst from Chicago. Inside the envelope, there was no personal note or family update, just the standard wedding invitation, treating me like a distant relative, whose current address was unknown and whose presence was optional. The coldness of it struck me harder than any angry confrontation could have. My family hadn't just rejected my choices, they'd completely erased me from their lives, not even knowing where I lived or what I'd accomplished. That night, I sat in my Austin apartment looking at the invitation and feeling a complex mixture of emotions. Part of me wanted to attend the wedding and show them how wrong they'd been about my potential. But a larger part recognized that their opinion no longer mattered as much as it once had. I was building something real and meaningful with or without their approval. The wedding invitation became a turning point that galvanized my determination to prove not just that I could succeed, but that I could excel beyond their wildest expectations. They'd chosen their golden child and written me off completely. Now I would show them what they'd lost when they decided I wasn't worth their investment or love. By my 26th birthday, Rodriguez Restoration had grown into one of Austin's most respected specialty construction companies, but I was ready for something bigger. The energy-efficient retrofitting techniques I'd developed were attracting attention from major commercial property owners across Texas, creating opportunities that required more resources and expertise than our small company could provide. Marcus and I had long conversations about expanding the business, but we both recognized that my vision required a different kind of company structure. With his blessing and continued partnership, I founded Green Foundation Innovations, specializing exclusively in sustainable building solutions for commercial properties. The company represented everything I'd learned about construction, combined with innovative approaches to environmental efficiency and business development. My first major contract came from Stellar Properties, a Dallas-based company that owned office buildings throughout the Southwest. Their portfolio included dozens of older commercial buildings that were becoming expensive to operate as energy costs rose, and tenants demanded more environmentally responsible landlords. Traditional retrofitting options were either too expensive or too disruptive to justify the investment. I proposed a comprehensive approach that addressed heating, cooling, lighting, and water systems, simultaneously using my grandfather's understanding of natural building physics combined with cutting-edge environmental technologies. The pilot project involved a 1960s office building in downtown Dallas that was losing tenants due to high utility costs and poor climate control. The retrofitting took 6 months and required careful coordination to minimize disruption to existing tenants. My team installed advanced insulation systems, upgraded windows with smart glass technology, and implemented geothermal heating and cooling that tapped into the Earth's natural temperature stability. The building's energy costs dropped by 42% within the first year, while tenant satisfaction scores improved dramatically. Stellar Properties was so impressed with the results that they contracted Green Foundation Innovations for 15 additional buildings across Texas, creating a workload that required rapid expansion. I hired experienced project managers, environmental engineers, and skilled craftsmen who shared my commitment to quality and innovation. The company grew from 3 employees to 50 in 18 months. The business success allowed me to make strategic investments in real estate and emerging technologies. I bought a modern home in Austin's Hill Country, complete with panoramic views and sustainable design features that showcased my company's capabilities. The house became both a personal sanctuary and a demonstration space for potential clients, proving that environmental responsibility didn't require sacrificing comfort or style. More importantly, I was creating something that honored Grandpa Thomas's values while addressing 21st century challenges. Every building we retrofitted lasted longer, cost less to operate, and reduced environmental impact without sacrificing functionality or aesthetics. We were proving that excellent craftsmanship and environmental stewardship could be profitable rather than contradictory goals. My personal wealth grew alongside the company's success. Green Foundation Innovations contracts were generating substantial profits, while my real estate investments appreciated rapidly in Austin's booming market. By age 28, my net worth exceeded $2 million, but the financial success felt less important than the recognition that I was building something meaningful and sustainable. The industry recognition came when Green Foundation Innovations won Texas Small Business of the Year, an award that celebrated both financial success and positive community impact. The ceremony took place at the Austin Convention Center, with Governor Abbott presenting the award to honor companies that exemplified entrepreneurial excellence and social responsibility. Standing on that stage, accepting recognition for building something from nothing, I thought about Grandpa Thomas and how proud he would have been to see his lessons applied to challenges he could never have imagined. The scared teenager who'd left Springfield 10 years earlier had become a respected businessman and innovator, proving that passion and expertise could overcome family rejection and limited resources. The media attention that followed the award brought new opportunities and challenges. Southwest Construction magazine featured me on their cover, with a story about sustainable building innovations, while industry conferences invited me to speak about retrofitting techniques and small business development. The visibility attracted larger clients and new talent while establishing Green Foundation Innovations as a leader in environmental construction solutions. But the most satisfying aspect of success was the impact on my employees and clients. We were creating good jobs that paid well and offered opportunities for advancement, while helping businesses reduce their environmental footprint and operating costs. Every project represented a positive contribution to both the economy and the environment. The expansion into Colorado and Arizona markets required careful planning and significant investment, but it also demonstrated that our techniques could succeed in different climates and regulatory environments. Each new market taught us something valuable about adapting sustainable technologies to local conditions while maintaining the quality standards that had built our reputation. Personal growth accompanied professional success, as I learned to balance the demands of running a rapidly expanding company with maintaining the hands-on involvement that had always defined my approach to construction. I still visited job sites regularly and participated in solving complex technical problems, but I also had to master delegation strategic planning and the leadership skills necessary for managing diverse teams across multiple states. The emotional turning point came during a celebration dinner at Austin's finest restaurant, where I was enjoying the Southwest Construction magazine cover story with my management team. The magazine article detailed Green Foundation Innovations' rapid growth and my background as a self-taught entrepreneur who'd built success through innovation and determination. At the next table, two businessmen were discussing construction industry news, and their conversation caught my attention when they mentioned Thompson Construction Company. One of them, a commercial property developer from Chicago, was explaining why he'd stopped using certain contractors. David Thompson's daughter is running that company into the ground, he said, shaking his head in apparent frustration. She's got all these fancy business theories that sound good in meetings, but they don't work in real construction. They used to be reliable, but now they're just another contractor that promises more than they can deliver. His companion nodded knowingly. I heard they've lost most of their major clients. Too bad, because the old man knew what he was doing. But these kids who think they can run construction companies with MBA degrees instead of actual experience usually end up learning the hard way. Hearing about my family's business struggles didn't bring the satisfaction I might have expected. Instead, I felt a strange emptiness, realizing how completely they'd cut me out of their lives, even as their carefully laid plans were falling apart. Sarah, the golden child who was supposed to transform Thompson Construction into a modern success story, was apparently failing in ways that were visible throughout the industry. That night, I sat on my deck overlooking Austin's lights and reflected on the journey that had brought me so far from Springfield. I'd proven that my parents were wrong about my potential, but their opinion no longer held the power to define my self-worth. I was successful because I'd followed my passion and honored my grandfather's teachings, not because I needed to show them anything. But I couldn't escape the irony that while I was building a thriving business based on everything Grandpa Thomas had taught me, his actual company was being destroyed by someone who'd never understood its fundamental values. The family legacy he'd spent decades creating was disappearing while his chosen successor was achieving everything he'd hoped for in a different context. The realization that my family's problems were no longer my responsibility marked another step in my emotional growth. I'd built something better than revenge, a successful, meaningful career that honored the past while creating positive change for the future. Whatever happened to Thompson Construction was the consequence of choices my parents had made, just as my success was the result of following my own path despite their rejection. Through Austin's extensive construction industry network, I began hearing more details about Thompson Construction's decline. The company that had been Springfield's most respected contractor for nearly a century was becoming a cautionary tale about the dangers of prioritizing credentials over experience in skilled trades businesses. Sarah's problems had started immediately after her Northwestern graduation, when she returned to Springfield with an MBA and ambitious plans to modernize Thompson Construction's operations. Her first initiatives involved implementing management consulting theories she'd learned in business school, starting with comprehensive restructuring of the company's traditional organizational hierarchy. She fired 3 experienced foremen who'd worked for the company for more than 20 years, replacing them with younger supervisors who had construction management degrees but limited hands-on experience. The decision created resentment among longtime employees while eliminating institutional knowledge that had been crucial to the company's reputation for quality workmanship. Sarah also outsourced critical subcontracting relationships to lowest bid providers, abandoning the partnership approach that had ensured reliable quality control for decades. The cost savings looked impressive in quarterly reports, but the results were disastrous when substandard electrical work and poor finishing created expensive callback situations that damaged client relationships. Her most catastrophic decision involved investing heavily in untested construction technologies that promised revolutionary improvements in efficiency and profitability. Sarah committed Thompson Construction to expensive equipment purchases and training programs based on vendor presentations rather than practical testing, stretching the company's financial resources while betting everything on unproven innovations. The technology investments failed spectacularly when the promised efficiencies didn't materialize, and the equipment proved unreliable in real working conditions. Thompson Construction was left with enormous debt payments for machinery that couldn't perform as advertised while still needing to maintain traditional equipment to complete projects successfully. Meanwhile, Sarah began accepting contracts for projects far beyond Thompson Construction's traditional scope, attracted by higher profit margins without considering the risks involved. The company bid on commercial developments and institutional projects that required expertise and resources they didn't possess, leading to cost overruns and quality problems that generated lawsuits and negative publicity. My father David, now 62, and facing health problems related to stress, found himself working 18-hour days trying to manage the damage while maintaining relationships with longtime clients who were losing faith in the company's reliability. The man who'd once been proud and controlling was reduced to apologizing constantly for problems he couldn't prevent or solve. The financial situation deteriorated rapidly as legal fees mounted and insurance premiums increased due to multiple claims related to defective work. Thompson Construction's bonding capacity decreased, limiting their ability to bid on larger projects that might have provided the revenue necessary to stabilize operations. They were trapped in a downward spiral that accelerated with each failed project and lost client relationship. The personal toll on my family was devastating. My mother Linda suffered 2 stress-related hospitalizations as she watched the business her father-in-law had built slowly disintegrate. The woman who'd once been confident and decisive became anxious and withdrawn, unable to understand how their carefully planned succession had gone so wrong. Sarah's marriage to Jonathan Cambridge collapsed after 2 years when he realized that Thompson Construction had become a financial liability rather than the asset he'd expected when proposing to the heir of a successful family business. The divorce was bitter and expensive, adding personal humiliation to the professional failures that were consuming Sarah's confidence and self-respect. Through industry contacts, I learned that several former Thompson Construction employees had approached competitors offering insider information about upcoming bid opportunities and client relationships. The company's reputation had deteriorated so severely that their own workers were actively seeking employment elsewhere while undermining their current employer's competitive position. The most tragic aspect of the situation was that everyone involved recognized the problems but felt powerless to address them effectively. Sarah lacked the practical experience necessary to understand what was going wrong, while my father's traditional knowledge couldn't overcome the financial and legal problems that her decisions had created. James Mitchell Thompson, construction's longtime accountant and family friend, began calling other industry contacts to quietly assess potential buyers for the company's remaining assets. The conversations were preliminary and confidential, but they represented acknowledgement that Thompson Construction might not survive as an independent business much longer. The breaking point arrived when Springfield's largest commercial client, Midwest Development Corporation, terminated their exclusive contractor agreement after Thompson Construction failed to complete a shopping center project on time and within budget. The lost contract eliminated nearly 40% of the company's annual revenue, while generating negative publicity that made attracting replacement business almost impossible. Industry publications began covering Thompson Construction's problems as an example of how family businesses could be destroyed by poor succession planning and generational conflicts between traditional methods and modern management theories. The articles were professionally written and factual, but they felt like obituaries for a company that had once been synonymous with quality and reliability. The climactic revelation came when James Mitchell contacted me directly, explaining that he'd obtained my information through mutual industry acquaintances. The conversation was awkward initially, as we'd had limited interaction during my childhood, and he wasn't sure how I'd react to hearing from someone connected to my family. James explained that Thompson Construction would declare bankruptcy within 60 days unless someone could inject serious capital and completely restructure operations. The company owed nearly $1 million to suppliers and subcontractors while facing multiple lawsuits that threatened to consume any remaining assets. But the most shocking information involved a sealed envelope that my grandfather Thomas had left with specific instructions for James to open only if Thompson Construction faced imminent destruction. The envelope had remained unopened for more than 12 years. But the current crisis met the conditions Thomas had specified for revealing its contents. Inside the envelope was a handwritten letter from Grandpa Thomas, dated just months before his death, along with detailed architectural drawings and business plans that demonstrated remarkable foresight about the construction industry's future direction. The letter revealed that Thomas had always intended for me to eventually save the family business, having predicted that Sarah's academic credentials wouldn't translate into practical success. The letter concluded with specific instructions for James to contact me if Thompson Construction ever faced bankruptcy, because true builders don't just construct buildings, they rebuild what's been broken, including families. My grandfather had somehow known that his company would need rescuing, and that I would be the only family member with the knowledge and resources necessary to save it. Reading that letter through James's phone call, I realized that Grandpa Thomas had understood my parents' character better than they understood themselves. He'd known that their favoritism would eventually destroy what he'd spent decades building, and he'd planned for my return even while I was being pushed away from the family. The phone call that changed everything came at 2:17 on a Tuesday morning, jarring me awake in my Austin home. My father's voice was barely recognizable, cracked by exhaustion, and stripped of the authority that had once intimidated me. David Thompson, the man who'd banished me from his family 10 years earlier, was begging his disowned son to save everything he'd failed to protect. "Ryan!" He whispered his words, broken by what sounded like years of accumulated pain. "I know I have no right to ask anything from you after what we did. But Thompson Construction is dying, and you're the only person who might be able to save it. Please, I'm begging you to come home." The conversation that followed was surreal as my father admitted mistakes he'd never acknowledged before. He confessed that Sarah's MBA strategies had been disasters that destroyed relationships, wasted resources, and alienated everyone who'd made the company successful. The golden child they'd chosen over me had proven incapable of understanding the fundamental principles that made construction businesses work. Between tears and apologies, Dad explained that they had maybe 60 days before bankruptcy would force them to liquidate everything Grandpa Thomas had built. The suppliers were demanding payment, the losers were circling, and the employees were abandoning a sinking ship. Thompson Construction's century of success was about to end in complete failure. "I was wrong about everything," he said, his voice breaking completely. "Wrong about you, wrong about Sarah, wrong about what the business needed. Your grandfather tried to tell me, but I was too proud and too stupid to listen. Now we've lost everything, and it's all my fault. I listened to my father's desperation while feeling a complex mixture of emotions I couldn't have anticipated. Part of me wanted to hang up and let them face the consequences of their choices. But another part, the part that still remembered Grandpa Thomas's lessons about responsibility and family, knew I couldn't walk away from people who needed help, even if they were the same people who'd rejected me. After an hour of painful conversation, I agreed to return to Springfield for a family meeting, but only under strict conditions. The meeting would take place at Thompson Construction's office with all family members present, and they would have to listen to my complete assessment of the situation before making any decisions about the future. The drive from Austin to Springfield took 12 hours and felt like traveling backward through time. Every mile brought memories of the teenager who'd fled this same route in heartbreak and anger, carrying nothing but his grandfather's tools and his determination to prove his worth. Now I was returning as the successful businessman my parents had never believed I could become. Springfield looked smaller and more rundown than I remembered. The downtown area showed signs of economic decline with several empty storefronts and aging infrastructure that spoke of a community struggling to adapt to changing times. Thompson Construction's office building, once a symbol of prosperity and stability, needed exterior maintenance that reflected the company's current financial problems. Inside the building, the changes were even more dramatic. The lobby, that had once displayed Grandpa Thomas's construction photos and industry awards, now looked tired and disorganized. Sarah's college certificates and business degrees hung on walls where family history had once been celebrated, but even those seemed diminished by the obvious financial stress affecting every aspect of the operation. The meeting took place in the conference room, where I'd once listened to my grandfather explain construction principles to visiting clients and potential partners. Now the same space held the 3 family members who'd rejected me, each showing the physical and emotional toll of watching their carefully planned future collapse around them. My mother Linda looked fragile and older than her 58 years, with stress lines and a nervous energy that suggested ongoing health problems. The confident woman who'd once dismissed my potential had been replaced by someone who seemed genuinely frightened about the future. When she saw me, tears started immediately as she struggled to find words for an apology that was 10 years overdue. Sarah, now 31, was the most dramatically changed. The golden child who'd once embodied our parents' ambitions looked exhausted and defeated, carrying the weight of expectations she'd never been equipped to meet. Her business attire was professional, but worn suggesting financial pressures that extended beyond the company's problems to her personal life. My father appeared to have aged 15 years in the decade since I'd left home. The man who'd once been proud and controlling now sat hunched over financial documents that told the story of complete business failure. His hair was gray, his face lined with worry, and his hands shook slightly as he spread out papers that documented the extent of Thompson Construction's collapse. The financial reality was worse than even James Mitchell's warnings had suggested. The company owed $1,300,000 to various creditors while facing 6 active lawsuits related to defective construction work. Their bonding capacity had been revoked, their credit lines were exhausted, and their insurance premiums had increased to unsustainable levels due to multiple claims. But the emotional reality was equally devastating. Sarah finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper, as she admitted truths that had taken years of failure to acknowledge. She'd never wanted the construction business, but had felt pressured to fulfill expectations that were impossible to meet. She'd known from the beginning that I was the family member who truly understood construction, but she'd been too proud and too frightened to admit her inadequacy until it was too late. I tried to reach out to you several times over the years. Sarah confessed, her eyes focused on the table rather than my face. I wrote letters I never sent, looked up your information online, even drove past your apartment in Austin once when I was there for a business conference. But I was too ashamed to make contact after what we'd done to you. The admission that she'd known about my success, but had been unable to bridge the gap between us, added another layer of tragedy to the family's collapse. While I'd been building green foundation innovations and proving my worth in the construction industry, Sarah had been drowning in responsibilities she'd never wanted and destroying something she'd never understood. My father's breakdown was complete as he acknowledged that every major decision he'd made regarding the family business had been wrong. Choosing Sarah over me, implementing her MBA strategies, abandoning the traditional approaches that had built their reputation, each choice had moved them further from success and closer to the catastrophic failure they now faced. Your grandfather knew, Dad said, his voice filled with regret and self-recrimination. He tried to tell me that you were the one who understood what this business really needed, but I was too arrogant to listen. I thought education and credentials mattered more than passion and experience. I was completely wrong. The emotional climax arrived when I opened Grandpa Thomas's sealed letter in front of my family, reading his words aloud for the first time since James had described their contents. The letter revealed detailed plans for expanding Thompson Construction, using sustainable building techniques that were identical to the innovations I'd later developed independently for Green Foundation Innovations. Grandpa Thomas had somehow predicted the future of construction and had known that I was the only family member with the vision and ability to guide the business through that transition. His letter concluded with specific instructions for giving me complete control of the company if it ever faced destruction, because true builders don't just construct buildings, they rebuild what's been broken, including families. As I finished reading, the room fell silent, except for my mother's quiet crying and the sound of papers rustling as my father gathered the financial documents that represented 4 generations of family failure and success. In that moment, I realized that my return to Springfield wasn't just about saving a business. It was about healing relationships that had been damaged by pride, misunderstanding, and the painful consequences of choosing image over substance. The decision I made in that conference room would determine not only Thompson Construction's future, but also whether our family could move beyond the mistakes that had driven us apart and find a way to rebuild trust and respect between people who'd hurt each other deeply. Looking at my broken family sitting around that conference table, I realized that revenge would be hollow compared to the opportunity for genuine healing and rebuilding. The scared teenager who'd fled Springfield had been replaced by someone capable of seeing beyond past hurts to potential futures that could honor both my grandfather's legacy and the lessons learned through years of separation and growth. I'll save Thompson Construction. I told them, my voice steady but filled with emotion. But we're going to do this the right way, using the principles Grandpa Thomas tried to teach all of us. The business will be rebuilt according to his vision and my experience focusing on quality innovation and genuine service to our community. The conditions I set were non-negotiable but fair. I would invest $2 million of my own money to stabilize operations and fund the transition, but I would have complete authority over all business decisions during the rebuilding process. Sarah would step aside willingly, focusing her MBA skills on administrative functions that matched her actual strengths rather than trying to manage construction operations she'd never understood. My father would remain involved as a senior consultant, sharing his knowledge of local relationships and historical context while accepting that leadership had passed to the next generation. My mother would oversee customer service and community relations roles that utilized her social skills without requiring technical expertise she'd never possessed. The transformation began immediately with rehiring experienced foremen and skilled workers who'd been driven away by Sarah's misguided management theories. I personally apologized to each returning employee, explaining that their expertise was valued and that we were committed to rebuilding Thompson Construction's reputation for excellence through teamwork and mutual respect. We also terminated relationships with the low-bid subcontractors who'd contributed to quality problems, returning to the partnership approach that had sustained the company's reputation for decades. The initial costs were higher, but the improved quality and reliability quickly restored client confidence and generated positive word-of-mouth referrals. My energy-efficient retrofitting techniques adapted for the Midwest market became Thompson Construction's signature specialization, differentiating us from competitors while addressing growing demand for sustainable building solutions. We combined traditional craftsmanship with modern environmental technologies, creating services that honored the past while meeting contemporary needs. The business turnaround took 18 months of intensive effort, but the results exceeded everyone's expectations. Thompson Construction not only survived but emerged stronger than ever with a diversified service portfolio and a reputation for innovation that attracted clients from throughout the region. We were employing twice as many people as before the crisis, while generating higher profits through improved efficiency and value-added services. The personal healing process was more gradual but equally meaningful. My mother's health improved dramatically as financial stress decreased and family relationships stabilized. She became genuinely interested in understanding the construction business for the first time, asking thoughtful questions about techniques and client needs that helped her excel in customer relations. My father learned to respect my expertise in leadership while finding fulfillment in mentoring younger employees and sharing stories about the company's history. The controlling, dismissive man I remembered was replaced by someone who appreciated collaboration and recognized that true wisdom came from experience rather than authority. Sarah discovered genuine relief in stepping away from responsibilities she'd never wanted, using her business education to develop administrative systems and financial controls that supported rather than hindered construction operations. She also began pursuing her own interests in small business consulting, helping other family companies navigate succession challenges more successfully than we had. The most symbolic moment came when I restored Grandpa Thomas's original office exactly as he'd left it, adding my industry awards and magazine covers alongside his vintage construction tools and family photos. The space became a reminder that success built on solid foundations could survive any temporary setbacks or misguided decisions. 2 years after that desperate midnight phone call, Thompson Construction was thriving again as the premier contractor in Central Illinois. We'd expanded our services, improved our profitability, and most importantly, restored the reputation for integrity and excellence that had defined 4 generations of family commitment to quality construction. My personal net worth had grown substantially through both Green Foundation Innovations' continued success and Thompson Construction's profitable revival, but the financial gains felt less important than the restoration of family relationships and business principles that honored my grandfather's memory while building something sustainable for the future. The deepest satisfaction came from knowing that we transformed a crisis caused by favoritism and poor judgment into an opportunity for growth, understanding, and genuine family unity. The golden child favoritism that had driven us apart was replaced by mutual respect based on actual contributions rather than imagined potential. Standing in Grandpa Thomas's restored office, surrounded by evidence of both historical achievements and contemporary success, I realized that being pushed out of my family had been the greatest gift they could have given me. The rejection had forced me to develop independence, resilience, and expertise that I never would have gained if they'd simply handed me the business without requiring me to prove my worth. My parents' favoritism towards Sarah had been a painful mistake that caused years of family division and nearly destroyed a century-old business. But their inability to see my potential had ultimately led me to exceed even my own expectations, building success that went far beyond anything they could have provided through family connections or inherited advantages. The life lesson was clear: sometimes the greatest obstacles become the most important opportunities for growth, and the people who reject us often do us the greatest favor by forcing us to discover our own strength and potential. True success comes not from meeting others' expectations, but from following our own passion and principles regardless of external approval or disapproval. Family businesses work best when they're based on genuine capability and shared values rather than favoritism and assumed succession. The golden child approach that had seemed so logical to my parents had ignored fundamental realities about individual strengths, personal interests, and the specific skills required for construction industry success. Most importantly, I learned that forgiveness and rebuilding are more powerful than revenge or resentment. By choosing to save my family's business rather than watching it fail, I'd gained something more valuable than vindication: the satisfaction of honoring my grandfather's legacy, while creating opportunities for future generations to build on solid foundations of mutual respect and shared commitment to excellence. Thompson Construction continues to grow and innovate, serving as proof that traditional family businesses can adapt to contemporary challenges without abandoning the fundamental values that made them successful. We're not just building structures, we're building relationships, community connections, and sustainable solutions that will serve our clients and employees for decades to come. The scared teenager who fled Springfield has become a confident leader who understands that true strength comes from lifting others up rather than pushing them down. The family that nearly destroyed itself through favoritism and pride has learned to celebrate individual contributions while working toward shared goals that benefit everyone involved. As I look toward the future, I see endless possibilities for continuing to honor Grandpa Thomas's legacy while building something even better than what came before. The foundation is solid, the relationships are healthy, and the commitment to excellence remains unwavering. Sometimes the greatest success stories begin with the most painful rejections, and the families that seem most broken can become the strongest when they're rebuilt on honesty, respect, and genuine understanding. What would you do if your family chose someone else over you, only to realize years later that they'd made a terrible mistake? Would you help them rebuild what they'd destroyed, or would you let them face the consequences of their choices alone? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video if you believe that family businesses should be based on actual ability rather than favoritism. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming rejection and building success through determination and hard work. And please share this story with anyone who's ever felt like the overlooked family member. Sometimes being pushed aside is exactly what we need to discover our true potential. Thank you for listening to this journey of family conflict, personal growth, and ultimate redemption. Remember that your worth isn't determined by others' opinions of your potential, but by your commitment to following your passion and building something meaningful regardless of external approval. Keep building your dreams one solid foundation at a time.